welcome back to See and Free Studio. This is the place where we like to highlight what makes each of us unique, special, and different. You know, one of the silver linings of the past year, which has been a rough one for many people, is that you can reconnect with people that maybe you haven't talked to in a while. And our next guest is one of those people for me. We met in 7th grade social studies class in Kingwood, Texas. And now both of us are what I call Texpats, expats from Texas. Aisha Sultan is a nationally syndicated columnist, award-winning filmmaker, and features writer. She's been featured in The Atlantic, Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, and has received several awards for her writing. She really focuses on education, families, and inequality, and I've really enjoyed reading everything she's been writing in the last few years, and I want to welcome Aisha Sultan.
Thank you. It's so good to connect with you again after so many years, but because of social media nowadays, and you can kind of keep an eye on what people are doing, I feel like we've been in touch without actually having a chance to talk before.
It's true. It's very true. I know. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse, right? That you are inundated with all of the social media aspects, but then you get to catch up with people that you haven't gotten to talk to in such a long time. And I'm so glad I get to do that with you today. You know, Aisha, tell people, where are you and what are you doing these days?
So I'm based in St. Louis, Missouri. And before the pandemic, I would actually travel quite a bit, doing speaking events, screening the film, talking to different groups, moderating panels. But since the pandemic, we've been pretty grounded here in the Midwest in St. Louis. And so I write a weekly column for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch that runs in some other markets too. And about 4 years ago, I decided I wanted to tell stories in another format as well, another medium. And so I started making independent films. And now I'm working on my 3rd short film. And I have 2 teenage kids. My husband and I are in the throes of all that, high school, everything. And my family's still all in Texas. So we just have a lot going on.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. I also have a teenager. This whole full-on puberty thing. We will make it together. It's crazy.
Yeah, I read The Teenage Brain, which I thought was a great book because it helped me understand a lot about the biochemistry and just the physiology of what being a teenager is like right now. And I wish I'd read it years before. I wish I'd read it when my kids were 10. I think it would have made 11, 12, 13 easier for me.
Well, there's some great advice. We need to tell people to read this book. If you haven't gotten to the teenage years or you're in that tween years, this is the time to do it. I'll have to go find it now and do some retroactive parenting, I think. Aisha, this whole show for me is about highlighting what makes people unique, special, and different. And it was important to me, especially over this past year when the world seemed uncertain for a lot of people, that they could rely on what's certain about themselves, and that's that thing that drives them. And that's one of the reasons I decided to do this. And so I would love to hear from you what your USD or your unique, special, and different is.
So I think there's 2 things. One is just a raging curiosity. And that has been the foundation of my career and the way I navigate the world and what makes me happy. And then the other is knowing that I have deeply held beliefs that I'm very passionate about, and discussing with others, sharing with others, convincing others. That's something else that I had to recognize about myself and realize that I wasn't going to feel truly fulfilled at work unless I was in a space where I could utilize both these parts of myself. And I think, you obviously know this, that work is such a huge part of our life. And if you are lucky enough to derive meaning and purpose from it, then, that's kind of living the dream, I think.
Yeah, it is. And being able to use your USD in your work when it is such a big part of your life is something that I've always aspired to do. And it sounds like you have as well. You talked about this, like you had to discover this about yourself. Was there a moment for you where you discovered this is your USD, this unique combination, and you definitely wanted to take it to the next level?
Well, I think when you are a young adult and you're trying to figure out what am I going to do with my life, and you have so many competing, you have so many things pulling at you in different directions, like societal and parental expectations, perhaps what your peers are doing, what you think you ought to be doing. So I had a deep interest when I was in college in Texas in sociology and the way the world works, the way society works, the way power works in society. So I majored in sociology and international studies, and I studied abroad. I was really interested in the way the world works. And so I thought that I was going to go to graduate school, and I got into a master's program at the University of Chicago, which was great in this area, in this field. And I thought eventually I'd get a PhD and maybe write some books and teach. I'm really excited about ideas. If you, I don't know if you know what that feels like, but it's just like so thrilling and exciting to be able to experience or see the world or think about the world in a new way. And that's what made me feel most alive. So when I was in graduate school, I realized I had done internships at newspapers. I worked in my college papers, and I really missed being in the newsroom because it wasn't just about the idea, Jen. It was about being able to communicate and share those ideas with a larger group of people. And it was in the connection that I made with other people in the process of sharing ideas and talking about things. And that realization did not come to me immediately because I was offered, just by chance, an internship at the Wall Street Journal in their Dallas bureau. They tracked me down in Chicago and asked me if I wanted to do it, just word of mouth from someone else who I'd worked with. And I said, yeah, sure. And so the summer that I should have been writing my master's thesis, I went to go work at the Journal. And then after that, I was like, you know what? I don't know that I want to go back to grad school. I'm enjoying this a lot more than what I was doing in academia. And I felt like, well, I can take a temporary break. And that's one thing I've done a lot in my career, in my life, is I don't feel like anything is forever. Like I have to do this job this way forever, or I'm locked into this city forever. I always sort of think I'm going to keep doing this while it is meaningful and enjoyable for me, and I'm getting something out of it. And then when I feel like I've stagnated or I've gotten what I can out of it, then I'm going to do something different. And so I sort of like, am an accidental journalist, an accidental writer. It was never what I studied. I never took a single journalism class, but I followed this flow of what excited me. I really sort of just went with it. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It completely makes sense. And I love that story because it also speaks volumes to the fact that your USD is, while it's great to have it as something that you leverage within your job, it's more than that, right? Because it's the qualities about you that you were able to take, from studying sociology to going in and to writing and then just flourishing in your career. I love that. And I think sometimes we don't always take time to see the world the way you did, which was like things that we enjoy. I tell people all the time, I'm like, there's energy sucking things that we can do, and there's energy boosting things that we can do. And sometimes we get really stuck on the energy sucking and we don't do enough of the energy boosting. And you chased after it, my friend, and it has worked out really well.
I have had a couple of opportunities to do other things while at my job at the Post. And I remember there was one particular crossroads. And, print media has been a very precarious industry for a long time because media has changed so much and the market has changed so much for it. So, there was a lot of anxiety around, do I want to stay at a newspaper for this long, or should I go explore this other thing? And a former editor said to me, I was asking him for advice. He said, figure out what specifically you love about what you do now and what you don't like about what you do now. Really think about it, and then think about how much of what you love you'll get to do in this other opportunity. And Sometimes when you want a completely different path, you might not realize that, oh, I really truly love leading a team or mentoring other people because I haven't done that as much in this current role. But you find ways to try different things. But still, I thought that was such great advice. And um, I'm a super reflective person. Like I think about my life experiences and I make lists all the time, like all kinds of lists about all kinds of things. And so I feel as though it just helps me know where I'm in life and where I'm going.
Yeah. Yeah. That's thank you for that, because I mean, just exploring that process, the introspection that you're doing, and then how it manifests into your writing and other forms of expression. Which I definitely want to talk about your film here in a little bit. Was there any time though you can remember where you felt like you had to use this USD to get you through a particularly tough challenge, where things weren't as clear, and you weren't having that enjoyment moment, and you
Yeah.
had to really lean heavily on it?
Yeah, I think anytime you've had a career of 20 plus years, you're going to have times when you're just like, what am I doing? This is not, I'm not happy with what I'm doing right now. And I certainly had a moment about 10, 11 years ago where I felt pulled in so many directions, like spread so thin. I was working on several projects at work. So in addition to writing the column, my kids were school aged, like young school aged kids. My husband has a very demanding job. I was involved in several community organizations and leadership ways. And, that period of life and I had a ton of social obligations. Um, it felt frenetic, exhausting, anxiety making. It made me feel very resentful about the division of labor in my house because I felt like I was just caring and doing too much. And I also felt like these social relationships, which should have been what were refueling me, felt like obligations that were depleting me. And so what I did was I said I needed to commit social suicide. So I applied for a fellowship outside of St. Louis at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And it took me out of the newsroom for 10 months. It took me out of St. Louis. And my kids and I went, and my husband commuted. He came on the weekends because he couldn't leave his job for that long. And I took a leave of absence at work. And I spent a year researching deeply and taking classes at the university and not publishing. And I really needed that sabbatical. I needed to. I needed it so much more than I even knew. And it was a pivotal moment in my life because I don't know that I would have stayed. I would have been able to sustain the path that I was on had I not taken that 10-month break.
Yeah, and we've had a few guests come on and talk about that, and I've been doing that myself. I took my very first job, Aisha, was at
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Gaddy's Pizza on
Yes.
Kingwood Drive. Yep, when I was 15, and I had been working since then. I love to work, and those breaks are so important because it either helps you like one reflect on what's working for you or not working for you, or it helps you to recommit to those things, and it sounds like you did that.
Yes. Yeah, and it gave me. I mean, sometimes your brain and your spirit needs to rest and recharge in order for you to be, especially if you're a creative person in the creative field. Like I am constantly having to come up with a new column every week or stories every other week. You just have to churn out a lot of ideas. And if you want them to be any good, you have to have sometimes you need an extended percolation time for your brain.
Yeah, yeah, you just need that moment to check out. Well, this is a point in the interview when I like to ask a random question, and the cool thing about it is that you get to pick a number between 1 and
Okay.
25, and that gives us the question. So what's your number?
18.
18. All right. All right. Ooh. Okay. If you could consult one person who is no longer with us, who would it be, and what would you ask?
Okay. Consult one person who's no longer with us. Who would it be, and what would you ask? Um, My temptation as a person of faith would be to want to consult someone who's considered a prophet in my faith, either, Moses, Abraham, Jesus, or Muhammad, uh, because so much of that informs the way I see the world and my own values as a human being. So I would say probably one of the great religious figures, in, in our monotheistic faith. And then I I'm so curious about this idea of God and our relationship with God, and how religion been such a force for so many things in this world. So I think I would love to be able to meet with these like leaders that really changed the course of civilization and history, um, and just be able to have a conversation.
I love it. I love it. And I do know that actually, I remember that about you and how important your faith is, and how it informs what you talked about early on, which is the value system, and holding on to that value system. And I would love to learn from those conversations. I can just imagine that. And I think that would be really, really great.
Yeah.
Aisha, one of
So
the things,
like,
go ahead.
I was raised in a Muslim family, and I joke sometimes about how in our high school of 3,000 kids, there were like three Muslims, and I was related to one of them. And so, there were not very many Muslims in Houston, Texas, when I was growing up in that suburb that we grew up in, and
Mm-hmm.
it taught me how to be an outsider. And there are also not very many people of color. It was a mostly
Correct.
white
Yeah.
Christian community. And I came from a working class family, and it was mostly a middle class to upper middle class community. So, in every way possible, from like ethnicity to race to religion to socioeconomic status, I always felt like I was on the outside of that community. That's not to say I didn't develop lasting friendships and ties. I did, but it taught me how to be an observer and a witness in this world, which is what I do for my work now. And
Yes.
so I feel like, those foundational transformative things that happen to us as children, we should pay attention to them and realize how they guide and inform like what we end up doing.
Yes, yes, and turn it into a strength, because you've done that.
Exactly.
I mean, you talked about that. Your curiosity, your unending, insatiable curiosity, that story resonates with me quite a bit, because you're right. It was a very kind of conformist community, and to stand out, actually was turns out to be a good thing.
Yeah, although it was difficult. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. It was like a difficult place to grow up if you were very different from everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
You know?
Yes. And I think, you have kids. I would love
Mhm.
to know, as they're growing up and you want to give them some advice about how to stay true to their unique, special, and different, what advice do you give, or would you give?
So now my kids are at an age where they don't want to hear any advice from me because, you know, they know way more than I do. But I think rather than giving them any advice, I want them to know that I can see things in them that are special and that are so filled with potential. And it doesn't have anything to do with what they're doing or achieving. It has to do with like who they are as human beings. And so I do like to, on occasion, point out to them that I see them. I see them for more than their grades, more than their activities, and I love them, and I believe in them. And I think that if you have parents or adults in your life, teachers, whoever, who feel like you feel like, oh, this person sees me and they believe in me, well, then you have a tremendous foundation for whatever you want to do in this world.
Yes, yes. And, parents, that's an important message, sometimes a difficult one. I know I struggle with that because I'm all about seeing and freeing, but when it's your own kid, sometimes I'm like,
Mhm.
whew, but you have potential that you're not living up to.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah. It's sometimes it's
absolutely.
hard because I'm like, I'm super impatient. Why aren't you getting it? But what you said is right. Like just seeing them for who they are and appreciating that is so important.
It's such a fundamental human need. Like, I want people to see me and appreciate me, and I want to feel known by people, like understood. It doesn't change. It doesn't stop once you're in adolescence. I feel like it's always there.
Yes, yeah, it is. And, I want to talk to you about something because you mentioned earlier that you've gone into filmmaking
Mhm.
and that's a whole different way for people to experience your story, your message.
Mhm.
And I would love to hear a little bit about what's coming up next for you.
Sure. So, the first film I made was a narrative short. It was like about 10 minutes long. It was a script, a made up story that I wrote the script and then, hired the actors and a director and the whole deal. And just like, it was totally new learning experience for me. It was amazing. And then the second film I made was a documentary, a true crime documentary about a woman who's serving a life sentence in a prison in Missouri. And that was more in my wheelhouse because it was fact based, a ton of interviews, and it was recreating the story and raising questions about the investigation and her incarceration. And so now the third project I'm working on is also a documentary, but it's more intimate. It's about how a single mom who lives in probably the most underserved zip code and one of the most violent zip codes in our area, has been trying to homeschool her children through this pandemic. And it's been very difficult because, before I got vaccinated, it was not very safe to bring in a crew. And yet, to let a story unfold in front of people, you need to be able to capture what's happening. So that's sort of been a challenge, but that's what I'm working on now.
I can't wait to see it. When do you have a release date yet?
No, not yet. We're actually still in post production. And that's the other thing I've realized is that, unlike a news story, which you can, like, write and then immediately post online or it's in the next day's paper, film takes so much longer. It takes so much longer. There's pre-production, then production, then post-production. And so I'm hoping within a few months I'll be able to like put it online at least or have it on some websites where people can see it. And I'll
That
definitely share a link.
Oh, good, good. And we will promote it on our site as well. So I'd love to see it. And if you haven't seen Aisha's other films, please go back and watch those, as well as read her column. I've really enjoyed reading your column this past year. It's been a year of news for sure, and you've done an excellent job covering it.
Thanks. Well, we went through, I mean, that's the other thing is that a lot of times I will share significant things that are happening in my life. And, my husband got really sick with COVID this past year. He's a healthcare worker, and I also got COVID from him. And I had very strong opinions about the way that we've handled the pandemic in this country, the way our leaders have handled the pandemic, the way personally we've responded to what's required of us to keep other people safe. So, and now as the vaccine rolls out, I have a lot of strong opinions about how that's going. And so I, I've been writing about these issues for a while now. And actually, Jen, I'll be really happy when I don't have to think about this so much anymore, when we can move on to other things as well.
Yeah,
But I mean, it's consumed all of our lives. It's turned all of our lives upside down.
it has, and it has also made us all think about our health differently, and our life. I think just differently, and that actually brings us to the organization that you're supporting. I would love for you to talk about. Is it the Lymphoma Research Foundation?
Yes,
And kind of why that's important to you, and why that's a particular health cause that you want to highlight.
sure. So, my father was diagnosed with lymphoma about 4 or 5 months ago, and it was really surprising and sort of out of the blue for us. And fortunately, certain types of lymphoma are very highly treatable. And my brother in law was also diagnosed with lymphoma in his early 30s, mid 30s, which is unusual because it's usually an older person's disease. And he was able to get treatment at MD Anderson and was able to get some experimental treatment, some immunotherapy, and in addition to all the other treatment they did. And he was able to go into remission. So I just, it's a cause that's very near and dear to my heart since I've had a couple of family members affected by it, and also because it is one of those cancers that I feel like we have so much room to help people recover from it.
Yes.
So hopefully by funding research, we can continue to find treatment options.
Yes, yes. Please, everyone, one, Aisha, hope your dad recovers and feels a sense of health that he deserves before all of this happened to him. And I want everyone, please, to go and donate to the Lymphoma Research Foundation. You mentioned MD Anderson. They've done incredible work in the space of cancer research and cancer treatments. But let's please support the Lymphoma Research Foundation. They need all the help that we can give them. And you'll see the code come back up in a little bit. So you just take your phone, you snap the QR code, and it'll take you right to the donation page. We want to raise as much money as we can through See and Free. And I want that money to go to Aisha's dad and his treatment and making sure that he gets well.
Thank you.
Aisha, it's been amazing catching up with you. I'm so thankful. I remember so vividly, knowing you in junior high when I moved to a very unfamiliar community and I felt like an outsider, and you made me feel like a friend. And I really appreciate that. And I'm appreciative that you came on the show today. And I wish you well, and I'm going to keep track of you.
Well, thank you. And I think one thing that I remember about you when we were growing up is that you just had a very warm spirit and heart, and you still do. So thank you for having me on.
Thanks, Aisha. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Everyone, that's a wrap for today's show. Please go check out Aisha's work, and then check us out at seeandfreestudio.com. You can subscribe, and you can also find us on YouTube and LinkedIn, and you'll be able to find us on Apple Podcasts and a number of other podcast mediums here pretty soon. So come on back and see us.